Sect a video. I wasn't supposed to find the second phone, or the secret email account, or the folder labeled Plan B. My name is Natalie Dawson. I'm 31. And 3 months ago, I thought I was going to marry the man of my dreams. Until the night I uncovered the real plan, and realized I was just a stepping stone in someone else's ambition. This is the story of how I went from wedding plans to courtroom battles, from loyalty to calculated betrayal, and how I turned the ashes of my old life into something unshakable. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted completely, stay until the end. You won't believe how it all unraveled. I met Daniel Monroe in an airport lounge. He was polished, charming, attentive. His confidence wasn't loud. It was the kind that made you lean in just to feel it. Within 6 months, we moved in together. Within 9, we were engaged. To the world, we were that couple. Pinterest-perfect vacations, brunches with friends, a growing savings account for a home in Lakewood. But behind the filtered photos was something else. Whispers, late-night texts he claimed were work emergencies. A sudden shift in how he looked at me, like I was a puzzle piece he no longer needed. I ignored it. Because love asks you to trust. Because I didn't want to believe that everything I'd built was based on a lie. Until I found the folder. Tucked inside the lining of his briefcase, it had dates, transactions, copies of my financial documents, and a signed lease, in Daniel's name, for a downtown loft I'd never seen. He was planning to leave me, but not before draining my savings, not before ruining my credit, not before walking away with everything we'd built, under his name. I sat on the kitchen floor, folder in hand, heart cracking wide open, and that's when the real story began. The kitchen lights buzzed overhead, too bright and too steady, like they didn't belong in a moment this broken. I sat there, frozen, holding his lies in my lap. The silence of the house felt sharper than any scream. I didn't cry. Not yet. I copied everything, scanned it into my phone, emailed it to a burner account. Then I put the folder back where I found it, exactly the way he left it. I needed him to think I was still blind, because I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. That night, Daniel came home late. Again. He kissed me on the cheek like he hadn't spent the afternoon signing a lease behind my back. "You good, babe?" he asked, loosening his tie. I nodded, my voice carefully controlled. "Just tired," he smiled. "Let's get dinner tomorrow, just us. We haven't done that in a while." A shiver ran down my spine. Tomorrow. That must have been the day he planned to do it. To tell me some version of the truth. To gaslight me into believing he needed space, or was overwhelmed. But I had 24 hours, and I was done playing house. While he slept, I dug deeper. Phone records, bank statements. I traced his connections, found names I didn't recognize, and one I did, Caroline Hayes, his colleague from New York. I opened her Instagram, and there they were. Matching watches, inside jokes in the comments, and one recent story with a blurry but unmistakable photo of Daniel's arm. In the loft I'd just seen on the lease, he wasn't just leaving me. He had already replaced me. That was the moment I stopped being sad and started getting ready. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed next to him, watching the rise and fall of his chest, the soft hum of his breathing. Every part of me wanted to scream, to shake him awake, to demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Because tomorrow wouldn't be his victory. It would be mine. At dawn, I made coffee. Calm, collected, played my role. "You sure you're up for dinner tonight?" he asked, smoothing his shirt. I smiled. "Absolutely." He kissed my forehead. I held back bile. As soon as he left, I got to work. I booked a session with a lawyer, a woman named Elise who came highly recommended and had fire in her eyes the moment I explained my situation. "You have the evidence?" she asked. I handed her a flash drive. "You're not the first," she muttered, flipping through my documentation. By noon, I had frozen the joint account. By 2, I had changed the password on all my financial apps. By 4, I visited the downtown loft, pretended I was touring it for rent. Daniel had moved in a few pieces already. A jacket on the chair, a toothbrush by the sink, and a framed photo of him and Caroline, laughing. I took photos of everything. That night, I dressed for dinner. But not for romance, for war. A red dress. He always said it made me look dangerous. He had no idea. At the restaurant, he was all charm and pretense. But I didn't smile, didn't sip the wine, didn't touch the appetizer. Instead, I leaned in and whispered, I found the folder. The blood drained from his face. I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. Photos, documents, screenshots. He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. Don't speak. Just know this. You don't get to decide how this ends. I do. And I stood up, left him there. Dinner untouched. Reputation unraveling. The next morning, the silence in the house wasn't heavy. It was clean. Cleansing. Daniel didn't come home. I didn't expect him to. Instead, I got a text. We need to talk. I ignored it. That afternoon, Elise called. He tried to access the joint account again. We locked it tighter. He also called my office. Twice. Let him squirm, I said. Oh, he is, she replied. My plan was working, but I wasn't done. I reached out to Caroline. We need to meet, I wrote. You're not going to like what I have to say, but you deserve to hear it. To my surprise, she agreed. We met in a neutral spot, a quiet cafe in the city. She looked nervous, younger than I remembered, smug on Instagram but unsure in real life. Why am I here? She asked, arms crossed. I slid the folder across the table, the one Daniel had so carefully hidden. She flipped through it. The color drained from her face. He said you were over, that you gave him the money. I let her read, let her see the dates, the overlap, the lies. You're not the first either, I told her quietly. She closed the folder slowly. He played us both. I nodded. The only question is what we do about it. And just like that, I had a new ally. Caroline and I weren't friends. Not yet. But we were allies. And allies can be dangerous. We met in secret twice more, at a quiet bookstore downtown, and later at Elise's office. Caroline had more than Instagram photos. She had texts, voicemails, a full timeline of his duplicity. Together, we reconstructed his movements, his deceptions, his schemes. And we made a plan. Elise called in a financial forensic expert. Within days, they uncovered more, a secondary account under Daniel's name with a recurring wire transfer from my business. He had hacked access to Ash and Ink's bookkeeping system. That was the final straw. We filed an injunction, froze his new account, and then we sent him a letter. One that made it clear he wasn't just losing me. He was losing everything he thought he'd stolen. And the best part? We gave him a choice: walk away or face public legal action. We didn't expect him to comply, which made what happened next absolutely perfect. Daniel's response came in less than 24 hours. But it wasn't an apology. It wasn't a compromise. It was a threat. He showed up at Ash and Ink unannounced, that signature smirk plastered across his face as if the storm he created was nothing but a breeze. Natalie, he said, he was resuming a casual chat. We need to talk, privately. I stayed behind the counter. Which part of the restraining order didn't you understand? You're ruining my life, he hissed. No, Daniel. You did that all by yourself. He took a step forward but froze when he noticed Caroline at the back of the bookstore. She raised her phone. Recording. You can't be serious, he muttered. Dead serious. Our lawyers will meet today. Keep this up and your story will end up in court. Or worse, the headlines. For the first time since all this began, Daniel looked unsure, smaller. Elise said you still have the option to take the deal, I added. He looked around. The shelves, the customers, Caroline, me. He didn't say a word, just turned around and walked out. And in that silence, I knew. The game had finally turned in my favor. In the days that followed, Daniel stayed quiet. Too quiet. His social media accounts went dark. No late-night texts, no calls to mutual friends. Elise said that was typical. The eye of the hurricane is always calm. But I didn't trust the calm. So I prepared. I filed official fraud claims against Daniel with the state. Elise helped me report the unauthorized access to Ash and Ink's financials. And with Caroline's help, we compiled a timeline that clearly documented the overlap of our relationships. A damning map of his deception. But even as we moved forward legally, a part of me couldn't let go of the emotional wreckage. The nights I woke up thinking he was still next to me. The memories that tried to convince me it wasn't as bad as it truly was. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, a courier dropped off a thick manila envelope at the bookstore. No return address, just my name in Daniel's handwriting. I opened it slowly, Inside was a letter, 10 pages long. It was a manifesto of sorts. Excuses, half apologies, twisted logic. He claimed he never meant to hurt me, that he was overwhelmed, that he thought I was strong enough to survive it. And then, a final page, a check, for part of the money he had siphoned from my accounts. It wasn't everything. It wasn't even most of it. But it was a gesture, a crack in his armor. I didn't cash it. Instead, I photocopied it, gave it to Elise, and pinned the original to the bulletin board in the back office. A reminder of what I had lost and of what I was reclaiming. The check sat on that bulletin board like a trophy, not of victory, but of proof that I'd faced the worst and was still standing. Ashen Ink started buzzing with something new. Hope. More customers were coming in, drawn not just by the books, but by the story behind the store. The whispers had started, the local blogs had picked it up, and soon enough, a journalist from a women's empowerment magazine requested an interview. I almost said no, but then I thought of how many women might still be stuck in their own version of Daniel. So I said yes. The article was raw, honest, vulnerable, and it went viral. Suddenly, Ashen Ink wasn't just a bookstore, it was a symbol. Emails flooded in, from strangers thanking me, from women sharing their own stories. The weight of it was enormous, but empowering. Then, one morning, as I opened the store, there was a man waiting, a stranger in a sharp suit. Natalie Dawson? Yes? I'm Jonathan Wells. I work with Marlowe Publishing. My heart skipped. We read your interview and your blog. We think your story deserves pages. I blinked. A book? He smiled. A memoir about betrayal, about survival, about starting over. He handed me a card, a folder, a dream I never dared to have. Inside that folder, an advance, creative freedom, and a belief that my voice mattered. I thought of that night I cried over shredded journals and cold coffee. I thought of the girl who had nothing left but words, and I said yes. Writing the book was like bleeding onto the page. Each chapter brought back memories I had locked away, the first red flags I ignored, the way Daniel shifted from charming to controlling, the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what I'd done wrong. But through every sentence, I took my power back. Jonathan checked in weekly, always supportive, never pushy. Elise became my sounding board. Caroline helped with edits, often pointing out lines where I was too kind to myself, or too cruel. We called it Ashes and Ink, the memoir. The cover was minimalist, black script over a soft cream background with a feather quill and smoldering ash drifting behind the title. When it launched, I expected a few sales, a niche audience. What I got instead was a movement. Book clubs across the country picked it up. Influencers began quoting lines from my story. One morning, I woke up to find a clip of a young woman in tears on TikTok, reading from the chapter where I wrote about losing myself to someone who promised to love me. I see myself in her, the girl whispered. Suddenly, my story was their story. And just like that, Natalie Dawson, the girl who once thought she was invisible, had found her voice. And the world was listening. I should have seen it coming. The moment the book reached bestseller lists, the vultures came circling. Online forums dissected my story. Gossip channels dug through old posts. Some tried to paint Daniel as the real victim. A misunderstood man attacked by a bitter ex. I knew it would happen. Elise warned me. But I wasn't prepared for the email that hit my inbox one Friday morning. It was from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. My father. He had left when I was 16. No goodbye, no forwarding address. And now he'd read my book. I saw pieces of myself in what you wrote, his message began. I read it 3 times. He spoke of regret, of shame, of admiration. He asked if I'd be willing to talk. It cracked something inside me. Not because I forgave him, but because I realized how far I had come, that the words I wrote in pain had the power to reach even the ghosts I thought long buried. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I walked through the aisles of Ashen Ink, running my fingers along the spines of stories others had written, and I knew mine was still unfolding. The past never sleeps, but neither do those who rise from it. I met him at a quiet cafe 2 towns over. Neutral ground. I arrived early, heart pounding, unsure what to expect. The man who walked in was older, grayer, and not as tall as I remembered. He looked like a ghost dressed in real skin, Natalie, he said softly, almost reverently. I didn't respond immediately, just nodded and motioned to the seat across from me. He sat with a heaviness that echoed years. I don't expect forgiveness, he began. I just needed to say, I was wrong. For leaving. For everything. His voice trembled. Not rehearsed. Real. We talked for hours. About nothing. About everything. I didn't give him absolution. But I gave him presence. And in doing so, I reclaimed a part of my history. Not for him, but for me. Later, as I watched him walk away, something in my chest loosened. Closure doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sighs. That night, I opened a new journal. The first line read, I am the author of my own healing. 2 weeks after the cafe, I was shelving a new batch of poetry books when Elise burst through the front door, her expression unreadable. You might want to sit for this, she said. She handed me a glossy magazine. On the cover, Daniel. Smiling. Holding hands with a woman who looked eerily familiar. The headline? Exclusive. The man behind the memoir. Finally speaks. My stomach dropped. I flipped through the pages, heart pounding. It was a self-serving interview. He claimed he was misrepresented, that I was bitter, and that our relationship was more complex than I made it seem. He painted himself as a misunderstood entrepreneur, a victim of cancel culture. But he miscalculated something. The world had changed. The comment sections exploded. With readers, with survivors, with women who had read my book and seen through his thinly veiled manipulation. Hashtags started trending. I stand with Natalie. Ashes and ink truth. Bloggers dismantled his story point by point. Experts in narcissistic abuse cited passages from my book as textbook examples. And by the end of the week, Marlowe Publishing released a statement. They stood by Ashes and ink, and me. Daniel had wanted redemption through exposure, but what he got was a mirror. One he couldn't look away from. And for once, it wasn't me who had to explain a damn thing. The interview backlash didn't fade after a news cycle. It grew louder. Podcast hosts analyzed Daniel's contradictions. Therapists broke down his responses as examples of gaslighting. And I stayed quiet. Not out of fear, but choice. Because I didn't need to defend the truth. It stood tall without my voice propping it up. What I didn't expect were the letters. Handwritten, typed, painted on canvas, women and men sending pieces of their souls because my book helped them name their pain. Some mailed journal pages they finally had the courage to write. Others sent photos of bookstores where Ashes and ink sat face out on shelves. The world didn't just listen. It responded. And as I opened each envelope, one thought echoed. This was never just about me. It was about all of us. Healing isn't linear. Justice isn't always a courtroom. Sometimes it's a story, told honestly, and shared widely. Because in the end, ashes aren't the end. They're where new stories begin. The morning sun filtered through the large glass windows of ash and ink, casting golden beams across the worn wooden floor. Business had become steady, not booming, but strong. More than strong enough to keep the doors open and allow me, finally, to breathe. Caroline set down 2 coffees on the counter and raised an eyebrow. You're on the news again, I groaned, half laughing. What now? She turned her phone around. A clip from a daytime talk show was playing. A famous actress held up my book, eyes shining. This memoir changed my life, she said. Every woman should read this. The audience erupted in applause. I blinked, mouth slightly open. I said, voice caught in my throat. That's surreal. It didn't stop there. That week alone, I was invited to 3 panels, offered an honorary speaking spot at a women's leadership summit, and contacted by 2 more publishers asking if I'd considered fiction. My inbox overflowed. But amid the frenzy, I stayed grounded. Because the heart of this journey was never fame. It was impact. One afternoon, a teenage girl stepped into the store, clutching a copy of Ashes and Ink to her chest. She looked nervous, eyes darting across the shelves until she found me. Hi, she whispered. I read your story, and I told my mom about what was happening with my stepdad. Silence. Then she added, she believed me. She got us out. Tears welled in my eyes. You're brave, I said, hugging her gently. So incredibly brave. That was the moment it clicked. Again. My healing had started a chain reaction. I wasn't just reclaiming my life. I was helping others reclaim theirs. The day the final shipment of the second edition arrived, I stood in the center of Ashen ink, surrounded by boxes labeled with my name. Natalie Dawson, not Daniel's ex, not the woman who was betrayed. Just me. I ran my fingers over the fresh covers. The gold embossing shimmered softly in the morning light. This version included a new foreword. One I wrote not for closure, but for continuation. A message to every reader who saw themselves in my story. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are becoming. That afternoon, I hosted a small reading event at the store. Familiar faces filled the chairs. Caroline, Elise, customers who had become friends, and a few new souls drawn by the whispers of healing found between the pages. I read a passage from the chapter called The Fire That Freed Me. My voice wavered at moments, but I didn't hide the emotion. Afterward, people lined up to speak, to hug, to cry. One woman, in her 60s, whispered, "You gave me the courage to leave after 30 years. A young man simply said, "Thank you," for showing that men can be survivors too. And then, at the very end, a woman I didn't recognize stepped forward. She held out a hand. "I'm Lauren." There was a pause. "Elise's sister." I blinked. "Oh, wow, hi." She told me everything, what you went through, how you stood back up. I just wanted to meet the woman who changed my sister's life. My throat tightened. That night, as I closed the store, I turned off the lights and stood in the quiet. Ashen ink had once been a sanctuary for my broken pieces. Now it was a lighthouse, a beacon for others finding their way out of the storm. I walked to the back room, past the bulletin board. The check was still there. Faded now. Irrelevant. Because I no longer needed proof of what I'd lost. I had everything I'd gained. My name, my story, my power, and I was just getting started.